British Prime Minister David Cameron has described the killing of a soldier in broad daylight on a London street as an attack on Britain and a betrayal of Islam. The two suspects, both of Nigerian descent, are converts to Islam.
The men are accused of hacking soldier Lee Rigby to death after running him over with a car. On Assignment's Doug Bernard spoke about the shocking attack with VOA's Henry Ridgwell in London. First, some of Henry's report.
This is Michael Adebolajo, one of the two suspects in the London attack, appearing in a Kenyan court in 2010. He was accused of seeking training with the terror group Al-Shabaab in neighbouring Somalia and deported back to Britain.
These people, they are mistreating us and we are innocent, believe me. We are clearly at war!
This video has surfaced of Adebolajo, seen here on the far left, attending an Islamist demonstration in 2007. A picture is emerging of young men radicalised on the street and on the internet, says terror expert Brooke Rogers of King's College London.
It's really difficult to understand when somebody's going to move from just talking about things online, attending this type of legal rally, espousing more extremist views.
One of the groups that these two men are known to have gone on campaigns with and marches across London and elsewhere in Britain is called Al-Muhajirun, and that's headed by a preacher called Anjem Chowdhury, who has some international repute as a fairly radical preacher here, who's been in some trouble with the authorities. And also on when the homecoming parades for troops coming back from Afghanistan and previously Iraq, there have been demonstrations by these groups like Al-Muhajirun in the towns where they're coming back, and so that has created a lot of tension. It appears that that is certainly one of the sources of radicalisation. But the leader of that group, Anjem Chowdhury, says he had not had contact with either of the accused men for at least 2 years. So it's that recent 2 years that appears to be the most critical, how they came from being involved in groups like that to committing such a barbaric and graphic crime, allegedly, as they did 2 weeks ago.
At times it seemed that there are frankly more TV cameras than followers around people like Anjem Chowdhury and some other radical clerics. But perhaps that's not so?
I think that's probably a fair point. Radical preachers like Anjem Chowdhury do garner a lot of media coverage, but it's also part of this debate currently here between what is the identity of British society, who should we allow to speak, where do the limits of freedom of speech end, if indeed there are limits to it, and what can be done to try and tackle homegrown terrorism, which many experts say pose the biggest danger to people on the streets.
You know, there's a parallel here in the United States. A lot of these same questions are being asked about the Tsarnaev brothers who were involved in the Boston Marathon bombing. One of the Tsarnaev brothers, the one who was shot dead, he was actually, it turns out now, involved in a 2011 triple homicide. He had a record of domestic abuse. So my question is it maybe just these guys, maybe just these few individuals, or there's just something wrong with them?
I think that's a very valid point. Both men grew up in very gritty, very poor parts of London where street gangs warfare was very prevalent, and some of them were involved in that violence as well.
Converts have played a role in a number of terror offences in Britain, says Robin Simcox of the Henry Jackson Society Policy Institute.
They feel as if their lives have made the wrong path, and that religion has almost been a way out for them initially, and then eventually with some individuals it's led to them following more extreme interpretations.
The London attack has reignited calls for radical Muslim preachers to be banned. Analysts say that as the investigation reveals new details, the debate between freedom of speech and tackling radicalisation is likely to intensify.
And so there's a lot of interest between whether there's any interplay here between gangs on the street and Islamist extremists, and whether extreme groups, extremist preachers can see some easy prey or easy targets, or possibly people who may go on to carry out the sort of violent attacks that they implore within gangs. So that's part of the police investigation as well, looking at the men's background. But certainly in this case, a lot of people are saying that this is such a barbaric crime that the perpetrators perhaps should be judged not only as terrorists, as the narrative seems to be dictating at the moment, but also as street criminals.
And again, that was VOA's Henry Ridgwell in London. Now, the dead British soldier, 25-year-old Lee Rigby, was an army band member and a machine gunner who had served in Afghanistan. He leaves behind a 2-year-old son.